Hello everyone and welcome back to Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio. My name is Giacomo.
And I'm Danny.
And today we're going to talk about competing in the sport of bodybuilding and whether or not it's healthy.
So people start going to the gym and they start getting results, whether that's to, get leaner or build more muscle. But there's not really an end goal in sight for a lot of people. Most people are motivated by setting a date and setting a final goal. And for runners, that could be running a race. Or for CrossFitters, that can be competing in a CrossFit Games. But for people who just, like to work out and just lift weights, sometimes it seems like, well, what is the point of me doing this? And I think that's why so many people come up with the goal of deciding to step on stage one day in a bodybuilding competition. And there's a lot that goes into it that most people don't consider when they decide to step on stage. And a lot of times, by the time people figure a lot of these things out, sometimes they're kind of in too deep. And that's one of the things that we want to talk about today is whether or not competing is ultimately a healthy thing to do, because I believe that that is sort of the idea that people have when they see bodybuilders, figure competitors, bikini athletes, physique on stage, that that's the top tier. That's the next level of being healthy and fit. And I wouldn't necessarily always agree with that. Even though I love the sport of bodybuilding, there's a lot that goes into it that people don't realize, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
When you look at somebody and they're on stage and their physique is at a very low body fat, they look very conditioned, and so one would think that's what I want to look like, and that's healthy to me. But one, that's not how anyone should look year round, because you're dropping your body composition, your body fat levels to places where they just aren't designed to be. To get your body to be in a position that it isn't meant to be, you have to change around the way that you eat and the way that you train. And to take those measures to an extreme state for a short period of time can have some long-term repercussions, both physically and mentally. And, the physical part of it, I think it's a lot easier for people to understand. Well, yeah, I get it. My body, I shouldn't be completely ripped year-round because, well, clearly it's not healthy to maintain that. But the mental aspect of competing is where most people miss the mark. And
most people are not even remotely prepared for it.
And that's the thing. And the crazy part about it, and I'll tell you this from experience, that there really is absolutely no way to know exactly what you'll be going through until you actually experience it yourself. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the sport shouldn't be taken lightly. It's something that you have to plan ahead for and go into not haphazardly. You have to know what to expect before, during, and after a competition, so that when you're actually going through it, you'll be able to recover mentally and physically as best as you can, and then realize that it's still going to take time to learn how to take care of your body during and after a competition.
So one of the things you said, Giacomo, that I think is really important is to really fully understand that deciding to step on stage for a competition means fully understanding that you're taking your body to an extreme that it is not naturally meant to go to. And in doing that, you're going to have to do, some extreme things to get your body into this extreme state. And, there are more and less healthy ways to go about this, but no matter how you look at it, getting your body fat levels to that level of conditioning, it's going to be difficult. And a lot of people go through really unhealthy means to get there. Not even necessarily with poor intentions, but because they don't know how to do it any other way. They don't know how to get there any other way. So first, let's talk about the categories. You have bikini, which is a female category, obviously, and they are mostly looking for a very well-proportioned body, not super lean, like no vascularity, no striations, with a full round butt and a little waist. Figure is also for females. It requires significantly more muscle than bikini, but more than anything, they're looking for a specific shape, and it's a very sort of martini glass shape. Very wide upper back, wide shoulders, little waist, and well-developed legs and glutes. Physique, they have this for men and women. Physique for women requires more muscle, very lean, striations, some vascularity, and a similar shape to figure. Physique for men is sort of like a, hunky beach boy look with a little waist and nice abs, nice pecs, nice arms. Legs you don't really see so much because they're wearing longer shorts. And then there's men's bodybuilding and women's bodybuilding, which is basically as big and as lean as you can be while keeping very aesthetic proportions. So varying degrees happening here. That's for people who don't know about the different categories of bodybuilding. There's a lot of women specifically. I feel like women jump into competitions a lot more easily than men do. And I think it's because a bikini body seems more attainable to the average woman than, say, a male bodybuilder body seems to the average male. So women see a bikini model and they want that, and they think that that's a step that they could reasonably make. And there's just a lot that goes into it that they don't realize. So first, I want to make a little disclaimer here. Obviously, Giacomo and I both compete in bodybuilding. He does bodybuilding, I do figure, and we love it. We really do. And there is a healthy way to do these things. Now, at the very end, I still care to say that you are less healthy than you normally are the day you're on stage. Nobody is at their health peak the day they're on stage, in my opinion. But there are ways that are much, much healthier to get your body to that level, to get your mind where it needs to be, and to get out of it safely. So we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But right now we're going to talk about a lot of the more dangerous things that people do to end up on stage.
Right until you get up to the period of time where I guess most people would call it contest prep, that where you're starting to remove food from your diet and still try to maintain muscle mass. I'd say everything up until that point can be perfectly healthy. Once you start to get into contest prep, though, that's the danger zone. That's where things can go wrong. And
so contest prep is the anywhere from 12 to 20 weeks or so when people are leaning out for the stage.
Exactly. And during this time, it's do or die, basically. You have to get your body ready, stage ready. And stage ready means being lean enough and looking the part so that when you're up there, you can see as much muscle as possible. A lot of the concern during contest prep comes with not being prepared. And not being prepared means not knowing what to do to get your body ready for the stage. People think, well, I have to lose weight to get leaner, right? So I'm just going to start taking food out of my diet, and they wind up eating a lot less. And then they also start changing the way they train too. And both of those things can be problematic.
So a lot of people, particularly women, right out of the gate, when they go into contest prep, they just start eating, like I'm on contest prep, I'm eating 1,400 calories a day now. And some people are just doing this as far as like 20 weeks out. Well, if you're eating 1,400 calories 20 weeks out, what are you going to do when you hit a plateau? Because you're going to hit a plateau when you're dieting for 20 weeks. It's going to happen. You're probably going to hit a few plateaus. And if you start at a very low number of calories, as your metabolism and your body adapts to that low number of calories, you're going to have to keep dropping lower and lower and lower to continue to lose the fat you need to lose to step on stage. So by the end of it, you can be on something like 800 to 1,000 calories, and that's not good for you. That is dangerous and very unhealthy. And what's going to happen when you start eating normally afterwards, after the competition, because nobody can be expected to eat that little, is you're going to blow up and you're going to feel awful about yourself.
Well, I think the problem for men in general is that everyone is trying to be as bulky as they can, so they wind up overeating during their off season. And when they start now you have a starting point for contest prep where you have a lot to lose. So by not being conditioned enough in the off season, they're going to have to wind up burning off a lot of their muscle at the end. And I think that's where the problem lies, because if they were conditioned when they started the contest prep, they would have a much shorter time frame where they were dieting down, and so the change could be gradual and they can maintain more muscle mass that way.
I would say that that's true of some people, but men can be just as guilty as women when it comes to just slashing calories right out of the gate and starting too low, and then they also end up eating very, very little at the end and generally looking too stringy on stage, which is also not good for their competition. But so that's one of the things that people do in addition to starting off with calories that are very, very low. Is it is also very common, very, very common to see competitors eating the same 5 or 6 foods over and over and over again every single day for 12 to 20 weeks. And that, variety is what gets you all your vitamins and minerals. Variety is also what keeps your sanity. So eating the same 5 foods for 20 weeks, I know that you've done it before, Giacomo. How did that turn out for you?
I mean, it's okay going through it and you feel like you're in control until you realize that you've been doing the same damn thing every day. And you're like, what? How do I keep doing this? The answer is you don't. You can't.
There eventually comes a point where you are just so sick of these 5 foods that you never, ever, ever want to eat them again.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you have the willpower and the discipline to have this regimented diet program, it's just not something that anyone really enjoys. I mean, come on, do you really enjoy having the same, oatmeal in the morning, sweet potatoes in the afternoon, same portion, same sizes, broccoli at night, maybe throw in some seitan during the day or berries, whatnot. It's just, I mean, you should be able to enjoy your food.
And the thing is that they're all healthy foods and they're all great foods, and I love all those foods, but when you're eating them over and over and over every single day for months on end, you're just gonna be so sick of them. It's not even funny, and that really is deflating mentally. And by the time contest prep comes, you spend your days dreaming about food. And honestly, if you're eating something crazy like 1,200 calories a day, you're going to be dreaming about food anyway because you're starving. You're literally starving. And that brings me to another point, that when you are getting really, really lean, I don't even care if your metabolism has been optimized and you're able to get stage lean on 1,800 calories a day, which is a lot, by the way, which is a real lot for a female to be able to be eating 1,800 calories and be stage ready. So even if your metabolism is optimized to that point, once your body hits a certain point of leanness, no matter how much you're eating, you're hungry because your body is not designed to always be that lean. So it's telling you, you want cookies right now because it wants you to put some weight back on. So regardless of whether you're eating 1,000 calories or 2,000 calories, when you're a certain leanness, you're probably going to be hungry.
And by restricting yourself to only a few different types of foods and not preparing food creatively, by this time when you have to get that much leaner, and you're at the end, it's going to lead, that restriction is going to lead, well, I don't want to say it's going to, but you have a much higher likelihood of wanting to binge afterwards. I mean, how many people do you see after a competition, they're basically saying, oh, I just can't wait till this show is over so I can have my cookie or my cake or this or that.
Well, we've all been there a little bit. Let's not knock having a cookie after a competition, okay? I had a Dillo after my last competition with a vegan bacon cheeseburger, and it was awesome, but it still wasn't a binge. So,
right, and I had a big bowl of ice cream and a big plate of barbecue, and it was great. My point is that it's a delicate balance, and that one day can lead to a pattern where you're all of a sudden you're spiraling out of control, and that one day can become 1 week, can become 3 weeks. And the truth of the matter is that after a show, you have to get yourself out the same way you got yourself in. Meaning you can't just increase add 500 to 1,000 calories to your diet every single day. And that's what winds up happening to a lot of people.
You can't just bump your calories back up to your quote-unquote maintenance level because your metabolism has adapted, and that's not your maintenance level anymore. How much are you eating right now? Unfortunately, that's your new maintenance level. So if you want to get it back up to where it was, you're going to have to do it slowly unless you're willing to put on a bunch of weight, which unfortunately will mostly be fat because you've been so hungry and so lean for so long that your body's hormones are basically primed for fat storage.
And all that does is set you back further for the next competition. And in the meanwhile, where you're getting back to the way that you want to look, even if you're not preparing to compete again, you're not going to be happy.
So let's talk a little bit about the training going into a competition and, what's healthy and basically what are some of the pitfalls that people fall into going into a competition.
I find that a lot of people start to fixate on rep ranges for their exercises, thinking that if they do higher rep ranges, their muscles are going to look more conditioned and be more ripped.
And that higher rep ranges are better for fat loss. That's a common myth.
Right. Well, I guess the theory is that if you're going into a higher rep range, your workout can be a little more thermogenic because it becomes there's more of a cardio element added into your workout. But why would you want to be burning your fat while you're also trying to gain muscle at the same time? It makes a lot more sense to separate the two.
Well, more than anything, I think that when you're in a caloric deficit, your muscle is already at risk of being metabolized for fuel at that point anyway. So by keeping your weights really heavy, as heavy as you can, it basically sends messages to your body that it needs that muscle and to please not use that for fuel. Now, I believe that there is benefit in a variety of rep ranges, in the 1 to 3 range, all the way up to 25. I've even done 50 reps on certain exercises, but never exclusively. I would never recommend for somebody to switch over to high reps while they're cutting for a show, but that is what happens. It happens all the time, and basically it tells your body, oh, we're not lifting heavy weights anymore. We don't need as much muscle as we have before. Nom, 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 and it eats all your muscles away. That's an exaggeration, but you get my point.
Right. So, to hold the same way you built that muscle with using a variety of rep ranges and also lifting heavy is the same way you're going to hold on to that muscle and maintain it.
So tell me a little bit about cardio and heading into a competition.
Well, I think the biggest mistake that people can make when preparing for a competition is to basically burn off as many calories as possible and with the expense of losing their muscle by, doing hours and hours and hours of cardio because, I don't even think it's intentional. It's just people don't really know how to lean their body out. They just know that they need to get leaner and lose weight. So they just wind up running for hours on a treadmill, for example. Not necessarily the best way to hold on to your muscle and lose weight at the same time.
Well, that's the thing, is that none of this is really rocket science. Like, you will get lean if you endlessly do cardio and continuously cut your calories. That's not a question. Cutting calories and cutting them and doing more and more and more cardio, yeah, you're going to get leaner, but you'll never get lean again. That'll be the only time you ever get lean because you can mess your body up really, really badly by going to these extremes. So I've heard of people doing up to like 3 hours a day of cardio on top of their lifting. That's not good for you. That's not good for any part of you, especially when you're under fueling so much. And it does burn. Your body is going to use whatever the hell it wants to use for fuel. And maybe that's stored glycogen. Hopefully that's stored fat, but it can also break down your muscle tissue into amino acids and utilize those for fuel as well. So your body sort of indiscriminately burns calories when doing long, lower intensity sessions of cardio. Another really common thing in contest prep is fasted cardio. You hear people doing, over an hour of fasted cardio before they even eat anything in the morning, which sounds horrible. I can't even imagine doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine doing it either. But I mean, let's face it, we've both been there in the past, and it's not fun.
Well, I've never done hours of fasted cardio. I have only done fasted cardio in conjunction with yohimbine HCl, which is blunted by the presence of insulin, which is the only reason that I would ever do fasted cardio. But that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day. In general, what do you think about fasted cardio?
In general, fasted cardio is not particularly the smartest way to burn fat, because while you will burn your fat stores because you don't have any food in your system, you're also going to burn your muscle off.
Fasted cardio has long been touted as the best way to burn fat because you burn a higher percentage of calories from fat during fasted cardio than in fed cardio. But in fasted cardio, because you don't have any fuel in you, you can't go as hard. So you're burning fewer calories overall, if that makes sense. If you sort of write that out, you'll see where I'm going with this. If you are fed, you can go harder, you'll burn more total calories. More of those calories will be coming from fat than if you had done the same amount of time at a lower intensity during fasted cardio. So overall, there's really no benefit to fasted cardio. Get your breakfast in you and go put some oomph in your workouts.
Another part of bodybuilding competitions that isn't taken into account when getting involved in the sport is the actual week before the show and the day of the show itself. There's a lot of information that's been out for decades, actually, and I think that this information stems from athletes who manipulated their bodies in specific ways, but were also taking performance-enhancing drugs and steroids. But what winds up happening is this information is digested in the natural bodybuilding world, and people mimic it, thinking they're going to get the same results, and they don't. In addition, these methods like dehydration, sodium manipulation, for example, they can be very damaging to your health and your body. I mean, just imagine throwing your electrolytes out of balance and having severe cramps on stage.
There have been bodybuilders who have died on stage.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are serious concerns not to be taken lightly. But the information is starting to change and the right information is becoming more accessible. But these deep-rooted beliefs, they're still very much a part of the bodybuilding culture and what we like to call peak week, the week before the show and the show day itself.
What's it called?
Peak week.
A lot of peak weeks usually entail giant carb manipulations, water manipulations, salt manipulations, sometimes introducing diuretics of various kinds, basically to try and get your body as lean and dry, but also as full as you possibly can on stage. Again, with the categories from before, peak weeks are usually a lot simpler for bikini all the way up to bodybuilding, which is when there's the most manipulations happening usually. Now, our coach actually, Lane Norton, put out a series of videos on bodybuilding.com. I believe it's on bodybuilding.com that I highly recommend that everybody who's interested in this sort of thing check out. I believe the series is called Don't Screw Up Your Peak Week. And it's really, really great. And he does a wonderful job explaining how basically your body is smarter than you are. And anything that you think you're doing to quote unquote trick your body into, releasing all of its water so that you're drier and eating a certain amount of sodium to fill your muscles back up, to a large degree is complete BS because your body, it regulates its water minute to minute. So, there's really no need to do so many of these things, and definitely not in the extreme way that many people do them. You hear people not drinking any water for 48 hours before their show. You're hungry. You're incredibly dehydrated. You probably haven't gone to the bathroom in days. You're stressed out because you're about to step on stage the next day. Let's not even get into the spray tan. So that's one of the questions we get asked all the time by complete strangers. why is everybody so tan? Why does everybody look so like fake and bake? And getting spray tanned, unless you're African American or very, very dark, getting spray tanned is just part of it. It's basically a requirement. If you go on stage without a spray tan, you just guarantee that you're not going to place, because the tan brings out your muscle definition under the stage lights, which are very, very harsh. You barely look dark on stage at all. You look crazy in person, but on stage, it actually looks like the way you want it to look.
So it's really helpful for the judges who are assessing you up close with these large bright lights in front of you, and they're able to see and grade you against your competition for muscular definition.
If you don't have that spray tan on and you're not dark enough, you're going to look like a plump sausage on stage, a vegan sausage, of course, without any muscle definition or striations or anything like that.
And I think the other thing is they want everyone to have the same color, basically, so it's even across the board.
Basically, yeah, I'm a very, very, very white person naturally. If I went on stage up against a dark-skinned person who had an almost identical physique to mine, she would win. Absolutely, because it looks so much better.
Right, so it's a level playing field, basically.
So you have competitors who are starving, super, super thirsty. I've heard of people like licking the sweat off the back of their hand just to stay hydrated. Cramping up. Cramps on stage are really, really common. You get dizzy because you're so hungry and thirsty. So the point that I'm making is so often you see people on stage, and this is probably the best they'll ever look. You know, you look at them, and I've said it myself. I'm like, that's the best I've ever looked and the worst I've ever felt. And I think most competitors could agree with that.
Well, yeah, exactly. And here's the thing. If it's going to be if you're going to be that fatigued and that drained from dieting down for so long
and training so much,
then why would you want to make it even harder to perform on stage? Because remember, bodybuilding is as much a performing art as it is a sport. You have to go up there and you have to flex and you have to pose and
you have to smile and look like it's easy.
And it's the furthest thing from easy. I mean, you're straining. This isn't like taking a selfie in front of a mirror and just flexing your bicep. I mean, you are holding these poses for a long period. You have a pool of sweat underneath you.
Yeah, if you've never been to a bodybuilding show, I can attest that even from the audience, halfway through the male bodybuilding judging, everybody on stage is pouring sweat.
Right, and I mean, there are routines for different athletes. Like, as a figure competitor, you're walking around in heels and presenting your body to the judges in the evening.
5-inch heels.
Exactly, and that requires a lot of focus. So you don't want to be ridiculously dehydrated and have your body thrown even further out of whack for that, for example. Or how about when you have to do a choreographed posing routine as a bodybuilder? I mean, you want to be as focused as possible for this.
Well, forget about that for a second. There's also the fact that when you do all these manipulations that you've never done to your body before, these crazy manipulations, you're basically just winging it. You've put in months of hard work and diligent dieting and practicing your posing and setting up your perfect tan and blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to wing it with water and sodium and just hope for the best because you have no idea what's going to happen. And the number of competitors that are like, oh, I held too much water or I looked really flat on stage. They know they looked better the week before or even the day after. And it's because they just played around with too much stuff. So gentle manipulations are always the way that I like to go.
And getting as ready as you can be for that week. The way that you look when you're a week out should be the way that you look on stage. If you're ready, you're ready. If you're not, maybe consider holding off until another show where you can be conditioned for it.
Exactly. If you're not ready a week out, there is no magic trick in the world that is going to make you stage ready in 7 days. So let's talk about some of the unhealthy things on the mental side of competing. Can we talk about for 1 minute that you literally work your butt off for months to walk on a stage so somebody can judge you against complete strangers based on your body only?
Right. And are they basing you on your body frame, or are they basing you on a specific model that everyone is trying to look like? I mean, you're being the best you that you can be. You're taking yourself to your genetic potential and making your body look a certain way. But the judges are looking at you and they're looking for a specific look.
And you may very well not be that look. And at the end of the day, when you ask for the judge's feedback, you're probably going to get a list of things that they think are wrong with your body. You know, small calves or needs to be leaner. That's always a fun one. And this can really, really affect you if you're not prepared for it. A lot of people, for most people, especially first-time competitors, this is the best you've ever looked in your entire life, and you think you walk on water. And that's awesome. I love that kind of confidence. But you need to be prepared to step on stage and basically get torn down. You don't know who's going to show up. Maybe, hopefully, you got the best bod there, but there's a big chance that you don't, and there's a big chance that you're not what the judges are looking for, and it's a very subjective sport, and you can only fit into the box of what the judges want to a degree. You have to do this because you love it, and you have to really believe in yourself and love yourself the way you are, or the judge's feedback and your placing, it can destroy you.
And remember that your body is constantly going to be a work in progress. You got to be happy with where you are and how hard you've worked for it, and realize that the best results will always continue to come with the more time that you put into taking care of yourself and being a healthier and fitter you for the long term. The more you build on your body for years and years and years, the better it's going to look. So don't get discouraged. Be proud of where you are, and remember that you can build upon that even more.
But if you have a body image issue to start with, which, let's get real, most people have some sort of body image issue. That's one of the main reasons why people start working out in the first place, is because there's something about their physicality that they don't like and they want to improve. So you have this formula of somebody who already is not pleased with their body, and they bust their butt and they're the happiest they've ever been with it and they're proud of themselves, and then a panel of complete strangers says, well, X, Y, and Z is wrong with you. That can be really, really crushing for the long term and set you right back to where you started, sometimes worse. So if you're one of those people who just hates their bodies, and this breaks my heart more than anything else, and I've been there. Of course, I was a 200-pound teenager. Of course, I've been there. But if you're one of these people who hates their body and thinks that, stepping on stage and competing is going to be the accomplishment that changes your life, it's not. It's not. If anything, you come out with more issues than you went in with. Ever. I've never seen somebody compete and be like, well, now I feel so good about myself, and now I love everything about myself, and I have so much confidence. It doesn't work that way.
That's the thing. It doesn't make anything easier. It actually makes everything that much harder. It's like putting a magnifying glass on everything that you've done, and then you have to go and think to yourself, am I going to keep doing this? Do I really want to go down this route? So you really have to think long and hard if this is something that even want to do just once, really.
You need to have a deep inner love of yourself in order to get through competing and feel really good about yourself. And even people who are happy with themselves and are proud of their accomplishments and their achievements, even those people are still going to have bad days where they look in the mirror and feel like, I'm too small or I'm too fat or whatever. It's going to happen. So if you're already a person who's super prone to that, I say put competing, if that's something that you were hoping to do, put it way, way off in the future. Work on that other stuff first. And I'm not saying it can never happen or it should never happen, but you got to get your mind right before you even think about competing, or it will wreck you.
We touched on this a little bit earlier, but let's just say that you've already competed and now you're dealing with the aftermath. The show's over, right? The hard work is done. Now it's time to relax and enjoy and revel in the fact that you were one of the few who were able to get your body to be stage ready and compete. What do you do now?
Well, what most people do after competition is go out to dinner. I think that 95% of people go out to dinner after a competition. That's totally fine. The problems that happen are when they're still going out for 3 meals a day all through the weekend, and then, finding themselves unable to stop eating throughout the week. And part of this is just hormonal. Your body's hormones are set to basically prepare for a famine. So you've not fed your body what it requires for so long that it basically thinks you're in a famine, and all of its hormones are set in a way so that you are going to want to stuff yourself, thinking that there will be another famine. Your body doesn't care that you wanted a 6-pack. Your body thinks that you're starving. So it sets you up. Your body sets you up to fail here. So you need to have an exit strategy. You need to have an exit strategy from your diet and from your training. You can't just double your calories and stop all your training, because your body is going to store a lot of fat. And more than that, you are going to feel terrible mentally and physically.
Exactly. And it's going to be mind over matter. I mean, you're going to be fighting your body. Like Danny said, this is your body, it's feast or famine. Your body's saying, feed me, feed me, feed me. And your brain is saying, feed me, feed me, feed me. But you know better than that, because you have to go into it with a plan. And like we were mentioning before, however you got into a show, you need to reverse out of it the same way, which means basically just doing the exact opposite of how you prepared for the show, both with meal preparation and with training.
So slowly increasing your calories, slowly decreasing your training, maybe doing a deload of some sort would be a good idea. But we've talked about this in other episodes. You want to slowly increase calories rather than rapidly increase them. But when you come out of a show and you finally feel like, if you've been in a very restrictive prep, you have been eating these same 5 foods, you want to eat other foods, you finally feel like, oh my God, I'm free, and you can't help it for many people. And you've been so diligent and regimented for months that feeling like you have no control around food is absolutely mentally crushing. Like, why can't I control myself right now around these foods? Like, I just measured every single gram of food that I put into my mouth for months, and now I just sat down and ate a whole package of bagels. Why can't I stop doing this, for example? And that can be really, really, crushing to someone's self-esteem that they've just spent so much time trying to build up.
So what you need to be doing is developing healthy eating habits year-round, and to apply those even after a show. And it's easier said than done, believe me, I know. But it is possible. Eating a variety of foods year-round is the way to go. If you're in a restrictive state beforehand, eventually you're going to give. And chances are, when you're at your weakest, that's usually where it's going to be your breaking point.
You're not going to give in and have one cookie. You're going to give in and have the bag of cookies and hate yourself. And chances are that one meal is going to turn into the rest of the day, is going to turn into the rest of the week, and then you're not going to know where you left off and how to pick up again. So that sort of brings me to another point about post-show. And a lot of people, especially first-timers, again, get what we call the post-competition blues, where, their goal, they finally reached it, now they don't have another goal. And they kind of want to hang on to that. And everybody that puts in all this work to be stage lean wants to stay stage lean. But the fact of the matter is, like we started this episode off with, is that it's not a natural state for your body to be in, and it can't stay that way. By increasing your calories slowly and reversing out of your prep very slowly, you can minimize the fat gain, but you need to be ready to not be stage lean. And for a lot of people, that's really sad. It makes them feel really bad about themselves. Like, oh, I don't look like I looked to... I mean, a lot of people especially first timers who are making a lot of these mistakes that we've talked about, they look completely different in 2 weeks. They look like a completely different person. I remember one time, many years ago, Giacomo competed and he gained 28 pounds overnight.
And a lot of that had to do with water manipulation, but some of it had to do with dieting and undereating and then overeating afterwards.
But you hear about competitors gaining, 20 pounds inside. I'm talking about female competitors here, 20 pounds inside 2 weeks. And that, for a lot of people, that's what they lost during their prep. So it's like they never even prepped for a show. It doesn't have to be this way. There's so many ways to avoid these traps. And times are changing, and I attribute very much of that to our own coach, Lane Norton. He's doing a wonderful job spreading great information and changing a lot of minds. But this bro mentality of these old school bodybuilding ways is still very, very prominent, and people who are not very familiar with competing fall into these traps constant. I mean, we've fallen into a couple of them ourselves over the past decade, but first timers fall into them a lot, and it can end up doing some severe damage mentally and physically, and just definitely things to look out for. So Giacomo, what are some of the things that you can do to avoid all of these pitfalls that we've talked about?
Well, one thing that's coming to mind right now is body image, and it is absolutely crucial to be completely aware of what you look like on stage and before contest prep. My recommendation is, well, one, there's nothing wrong with liking the way that you look when you're ready to step on stage. I mean, if you didn't want to be that way, you wouldn't compete in the first place. But you should not be fixated on that. I tell myself before going into contest prep, I look at my body and I look at the condition I'm in, and I say to myself, this is what I'm supposed to look like. This is what my body can look like year round, and this is healthy. And once I go past this point, it's okay, and it's all right to be stage ready, but that is not normal. It's unnatural, and it's for the sake of the show and the performance itself. If you keep that in mind and look at that, take a picture of yourself. Take a picture of yourself of what you look like before you start contest prep, and after you compete in a show, look at that picture again and say, this is what I'm going to look like in 12 weeks, and that's cool.
You're not necessarily going to look the same again in 12 weeks. I think that a big goal of competitors should always be to improve your off season. Work on being able to build muscle and be leaner than you were the off season prior. I think as important as it is to compare, I looked like this on stage this year and this on stage last year, and look at the difference that I made. Do the same thing with your off seasons. You can improve your off seasons just as much as you can improve your in-season body. So what Giacomo is saying is true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that is what you're going to go back to. Just understand that you'll be somewhere in between and be okay with that. Something that I think is super important is if you've never competed before, I recommend finding a coach. We talked about this in another episode. It was one of the questions. Don't be afraid to ask your coach questions before you even sign up with them. Are they going to give you, a copy and paste diet from somebody else? How often is your meal plan going to be updated? How frequently are you going to check in? Do they believe in refeeds? Do they believe in cheat meals? Do they count macros? Are they going to restrict your food? What type of cardio do they do? Do they help you with an exit strategy? Will they stick with you after your competition as well? What are their peak week methods, which they usually won't tell you all of them right out of the gate, but, ask them about what they think of water manipulation and sodium manipulation and all that jazz. Don't be afraid to ask questions because you're paying this person and ultimately they work for you and you want to find somebody who fits with you. Talk to their clients, see what their clients think of them or even their past clients. It's really important to find a coach who isn't going to steer you wrong. Just make sure that you find a coach who can explain to you what you're about to go through and who cares about your mental health as much as your physical health.
Think about it. Once you start working with a coach, they're going to be training and coaching you on an ongoing basis. And that time that you invest with that person, if you decide going in 3 months into working with somebody and you're in the middle of contest prep that you're not necessarily agreeing with their methods, I mean, you're in a tight spot because you might be stuck with them all throughout prep. And now, I mean, because they know your body, they got you there, and you got to keep going. You can't just necessarily switch coaches in the middle of preparing for a show. It can be very challenging that way. So know who you're working with, because once you start working with that person, you want to be able to work with them the whole way through and after the show.
So now that we've talked all this shit about competing, which we do, you're probably sitting there wondering, well, why would anybody ever want to do that? After everything they just said, why would anybody want to do that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. One, people are interested in getting their body to look that way. Two, maybe somebody has something to say. They're proud of the fact that they are healthier and fitter and they want to present themselves on stage. Maybe they have something that they want to represent. Like for us, it's a plant-based diet and a compassionate lifestyle, veganism.
Plant-based diet. It's called veganism, people. Well, people also compete just because they love it. I love the lifestyle. And I'm not talking about the bro lifestyle. I'm talking about the diligently going to the gym, 5 or 6 times a week, sticking to a schedule. I like counting my food. I like measuring my food and planning my food out. I enjoy getting stronger and getting faster, and I enjoy watching my body change, whether that's getting bigger or smaller. I'm doing that. I like that. I actually, believe it or not, I don't like the show day that much. I don't like being in a bikini and heels in front of people. I like winning, but the tan, the makeup, the hair, that's not my thing. But I love the lifestyle, and if you can develop a thick enough skin to other people's critique of you, because believe me, other people, even outside the judges, will critique you and think you're crazy. If you can develop a thick enough skin from it, bodybuilding can really teach you a lot about yourself and teach you how to have patience with yourself and be consistent. And I feel like there are so many lessons that you learn in the gym that translate to outside of the gym that are just invaluable. And you don't necessarily have to compete to reap those benefits, but I just love competing.
And I'm right there with you. I mean, I absolutely love the sport. I think of my body as silly as it sounds, as an open canvas, and I have my frame and my muscles, and I want to know how I can grow them over time and how my body will continue to change and adapt. And there's a whole lot of work that goes into doing that. It's
an art form.
Yeah, exactly. It's an art form.
So that wraps up our thoughts on whether or not competing is healthy. The very, very short answer is no, competing is not inherently healthy, but it doesn't have to be super unhealthy. Approach it smart, approach it carefully, approach it slowly, and you can avoid a lot of pitfalls that commonly come with competing.
Today we'd like to talk about one of our gym gadgets, the fat grips. Fat grips are made of some sort of a hard, rubbery type material. And what you do is you just put them over a barbell, and it makes any bar thicker in diameter, basically, which is harder to hold on to, which engages your grip in your forearms more. And that's basically it. They're really easy to put on and take off of just about any dumbbell or barbell. I'm pretty new to them. I got them as a gift for Christmas from Danny. And the reason why I love them so much is because I'm trying to strengthen my grip and my forearms in specific, because it can be a limiting factor. And I'm also getting to powerlifting, which requires you to have a strong grip. Usually we use straps for a lot of our exercises, so it can take away from training our forearms, and we do that for Not to get too off topic, but we do that for other reasons for bodybuilding. But anyhow, I've been using the fat grips for a little less than 3 weeks now, and I absolutely love them. I think that they've made a huge difference for me in a very short amount of time. When I go to grab dumbbells that have a thicker bar on them, like the 80-pound dumbbells and up, in the past it was kind of hard to balance them without my forearm moving around for pressing movements like a dumbbell bench press, for example. And now, after only using the fat grips for a couple of weeks, I can actually hold on to them firmly. My plan of attack so far has been to introduce them very slowly into my workouts. From what I've read, the fat grips will literally turn a lot of exercises into forearm exercises, which can be problematic for a couple of reasons. One, your forearms are going to be absolutely burnt out, and then you can't do any of your other exercises. And another reason is they're going to take away from the muscle groups that you're actually trying to train. So my plan so far has been to add them onto one exercise per workout and have it be, well, any exercise really, and then just to gradually increase my use of them. And doing it this way, I still feel a really good burn in my forearms, and my grip strength is increasing rapidly, but I'm not taking away from my larger body parts that I'm trying to work out. And I highly recommend them. And now we're going to take some questions. The first question is from Gibby23 on Instagram. And she asks, how do you calculate your own macros and what foods to eat during contest prep?
Well, we've kind of covered this in a couple other podcasts briefly, but calculating your macros is going to be very individual to the person. And what I like to do for people is have them keep a food log for a few days and see how much they're eating currently and then adjust from there. As far as calculating the actual macros themselves, the proteins, carbs, and fats, I like to have people somewhere in the range of 0.8 to 1.2 grams of protein per pound of lean body mass, which is often an estimate because most people don't know their actual body fat percentage because it's impossible to really know. So that's why I say somewhere in that range, which I guesstimate by looking at people and their measurements. And then the carbs and fat are really, really individual to the person. Sometimes we play around with the carbs and fat and see what sort of works better. For some people do better on higher carb and some people do better on higher fat. And I say give yourself at least 2 weeks of experimenting between there. I like to do anywhere from 0.2 grams of fat per pound to 0.35 grams of fat per pound. And then from there, I fill in the rest of the calories with carbohydrates. So sometimes higher carb, sometimes higher fat. Usually, I guess what most vegans would consider higher protein. But again, it also depends on your goals. Higher protein is a little bit more important in a fat loss phase and slightly less important in a muscle gain phase because you're going to get so many amino acids from the other foods that you're eating as well. But always start your caloric range. Look at the calories that you're eating currently, and that is where I would start manipulating from. As far as foods to eat in contest prep, whatever foods work for you and fit your macros. Typically, you're going to end up eating a lot of vegetables, which is really good because they're filling and you're eating less food. So vegetables are bigger. You get more volume per calorie. I'm a huge volume eater. I want a huge plate full of food all the time. So I find really high volume foods for low calories, a lot of squash, butternut squash, white potato versus sweet potato because you get much less sweet potato, vegetables, berries instead of bananas because you get more of them. And I do a lot of tofu, tempeh, seitan, a lot of seitan during contest prep. And, you know, I use mock meats as well. I don't limit sodium for people ever unless they have a blood pressure problem. Season stuff up however you like it. basically, if there's something that you do want during contest prep, find a way to work it in within your macro guidelines, and you can do it. Our next question is a two-parter. It's from Adam Farmer, and I believe he emailed this question in. He says, you talked a bit about creatine in episode 3, but I was wondering if you could go into some more detail, maybe in a future episode. Pros, cons, the different forms, and exactly how big of a difference can it make? Especially for someone like me who only just started working out a few months ago, ectomorph, hard gainer, and is slowly getting stronger and gaining some weight, but not seeing huge results.
Creatine, in my opinion, is by and far the most effective supplement that you could possibly take above and beyond anything else. I've been on and off for training over the past 10 or 20 years, but whenever I'm on, I'm supplementing with creatine, and hopefully I'll be training for the long term as well, and I have no intentions on stopping supplementing with creatine. It's a cell volumizer, so it's attracting water into the surrounding area where your muscles are, and what that does is basically allow you to work a lot harder before you go into failure during an exercise. It's interesting because a lot of people say, well, I started supplementing with creatine and then I gained 5 pounds of muscle, and then I stopped supplementing with creatine and I only lost a couple pounds because I keep working out that much harder afterwards. That's what we call bro science. You don't gain muscle by supplementing with creatine. You gain water and you gain the ability to train harder. When you train harder, you gain more muscle.
You can train harder because the creatine helps you generate more adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is your body's first energy source when exercising.
Exactly, as opposed to going through your first energy source and then breaking down other energy sources and then going into failure. Your first energy source lasts a lot longer, that ATP. Anyhow, I just find it really funny how a lot of people think that they're gaining instant muscle when they're supplementing with creatine and then losing muscle when they're not. You gain a couple pounds of water weight and then you level out after supplementing with creatine, and you're able to continue to train harder afterwards.
Any cons?
I haven't found there to be any cons whatsoever to supplementing with creatine.
I'll tell you a potential con. It's not a real con, but a lot of people think it's a con. So like Giacomo mentioned, it draws water into the cells, making them bigger. It can give you a little bit of a puffy look because you're holding more water. Of course, you're holding the water exactly where you want the water, which is in your muscles, which is where it will be the most useful. However, working with a lot of women like I do, the change in the scale of this water weight can really freak them out. They think they look puffy and, fluffy or chubby or however you want to say it. And I supplement with creatine as well, and I know exactly what they're talking about. It does give you a little bit of a slightly puffy look. You're not going to look like dry and tight necessarily unless you're already very lean. If you're very lean, it's not going to push any, if you're not lean, having volumized cells can just push the fat that you do have outward, giving it a puffy look. If you're very lean already, that's not going to happen. Most women have some body fat on them. That's the way women are built. So it can give women a little bit of a puffy look. However, it allows you to train harder, build more muscle, which boosts your metabolism and eventually helps you burn more fat. For women, I think creatine is a fantastic supplement. If you are just brave enough to live with 3 pounds of weight, because it's the best weight you'll ever gain, then it's a great supplement.
And overall, long term, you wind up having a much better body composition, which is the goal anyway, right? What's the best type of creatine?
I would say just a plain old creatine monohydrate is the most effective, most tried and true type of creatine. It's cheap. It's easy to find just about anywhere. It's almost always vegan, and it gets your creatine, it saturates your creatine levels to 100%. So really no need to have any other type of creatine. Sometimes creatine doesn't dissolve very well in water. or whatever it is you're mixing it in, and it just tastes kind of sandy, and that's a little bit unpleasant. So sometimes you can get a micronized creatine, which is just ground a little bit finer, and it's a little bit easier to take in. So you'll digest it a little bit faster that way because it's just got more surface area and it's smaller. But ultimately, just a plain old creatine monohydrate is the way to go.
The only time you'd have a formulation of creatine that isn't vegan is when it's in a gelatin capsule, or if there are other things added to it. Creatine in and of itself is always vegan. The second part of Adam's question. Adam says he also had an issue in the past with high levels of creatine in the blood after some muscle breakdown after a workout. So he's been wary of starting creatine. Wasn't sure the effect it would have.
So when I think of muscle breakdown in response to a workout that would produce higher creatinine levels, which I think is what you meant there, I think of rhabdomyolysis, which is basically like you worked out so hard that you had some muscle death and the contents of the muscle poured into the bloodstream, which can lead to kidney complications and, in really bad cases, kidney failure and death. So I'm happy that wasn't the case. So sometimes nicknamed rhabdo, but it's basically like you worked out so hard that you like exploded one of your muscles into your body. So that's the only reason that I could think of that a really hard workout would cause higher creatinine levels. Other than that, I think it's important to remember that creatinine and muscle creatine aren't the same thing. Creatine is found in a lot of meat products, and most non-vegan men get a lot of it in their diet just through that. So if ingesting creatine was a big problem, we'd be seeing a lot of really high creatinine levels in the blood in more men than we're seeing. So if somebody normally has slightly high creatinine levels, it can just come from the heavy lifting and not necessarily the creatine supplementation. A byproduct of heavy lifting is creatinine, which is created when creatine is broken down into the muscle to produce energy. And what's left is the creatinine, which is passed through the kidneys and excreted. So if you know that you have a kidney problem specifically that's not related to the rhabdo, because that would be gone. That would be like a one-time thing. But if you have consistent kidney problems, I would not listen to anything I have to say, and I would talk to a doctor about supplementing with creatine, because they're going to know more about what's safer for your kidneys than I will know. But in my opinion, creatine supplementation doesn't have a lot to do with elevated lab values, which were probably more related to the rhabdo than anything else. And I would suggest before you start taking creatine, if that's something you think about, that you get another blood draw to make sure that it's back at normal levels, and talk to your doctor about whether or not you have any sort of kidney issue going on. So hopefully that helps.
And that wraps up our episode of Vegan Proteins Muscles by Brussels Radio.
Thank you so much for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Bye.